Growth in Sub-Saharan Africa, IMF sees improvement, but high inflation and poverty remain. In its latest report on Sub-Saharan Africa, the International Monetary Fund presented a complex economic outlook, highlighting rising inflation, high poverty levels, and growing debt burdens. Tonight, we'll break down what this means for the region, where everyday life is increasingly shaped by these economic pressures. The IMF's report projects only modest economic growth for Sub-Saharan Africa, with a forecast of 3.6% this year, rising to just over 4% by 2025. But with inflation in double digits for nearly a third of the region, this growth is not enough to ease the cost of living crisis affecting millions. Everyday essentials, food, fuel, and housing are becoming unaffordable, pushing more families into poverty. For the region's central banks, bringing inflation down has become a top priority. But as IMF Deputy Director Catherine Petillo highlighted, this challenge must be balanced with the urgent need to drive development, create jobs, and meet the demands of a fast-growing population. The debt situation, however, complicates everything. Many African nations are struggling under heavy debt service obligations, and as these payments rise, they eat into funds that could be used to invest in vital infrastructure, healthcare, or education. And in cases where foreign reserves are too low, countries lack the buffers they need to handle shocks like fluctuating commodity prices or sudden shifts in global trade. Beyond the financial toll, this has real social consequences. Poverty remains alarmingly high, and job opportunities aren't keeping pace with the population. Petillo's call for strengthening social safety nets to protect the most vulnerable is critical here. But implementing these reforms is easier said than done, as trust in governance is fragile across much of the region. The IMF warns that these reforms must be handled transparently and communicated clearly to build public trust. If not, social and political unrest could intensify, particularly if people don't see tangible improvements in their day-to-day lives. At the same time, there are concerns about the effectiveness of some central banks in controlling inflation. Weaknesses in the monetary policy framework have affected public confidence in some countries, and restoring this trust will be essential for economic stability. The IMF is calling on these institutions to reinforce their commitment to low and stable inflation, but this will require strong leadership and external support. The IMF has provided over $60 billion in assistance to the region since 2020, but African economies still face a tough road ahead. The IMF stresses that support for the poorest nations and continued capacity building will be essential to help these countries manage the tough balancing act of reducing inflation, managing debt, and meeting their people's needs. It's a defining moment for Sub-Saharan Africa, where policy decisions now will shape the region's resilience and recovery for years to come. Whether the region can achieve economic stability while addressing the basic needs of its citizens remains to be seen.
Freedom Square.